It had been 3 months since Jenna had left Alex. 3 months since she decided that the possessive texts, the incessant calls, and the unnerving surveillance were too much for her. She thought moving cities would end it all, that Alex would remain a dark part of her past. But as Jenna would soon discover, some shadows cling more persistently than others. The move to the quiet town of Redwood seemed like the fresh start Jenna needed. Their community was small and tightly-knit, a place where secrets didn't stay hidden for long. Jenna found a quaint little house at the end of Willow Lane, a street lined with towering oaks and whispering pines that seemed to watch over the inhabitants. Her new job as a librarian gave her a sense of peace and purpose. Days passed in a routine blur of books and smiles from friendly locals. However, the serenity was short-lived. It started with the letters, unmarked, untraceable, and unsettling. They appeared in her mailbox every Thursday like clockwork, each note more invasive than the last. Thinking of you, the first note read, a seemingly innocent message if not for the underlying tone of obsession Jenna could almost feel bleeding through the paper. By the fourth letter, the words had transformed into something darker. I can see you are happier without me. But are you really safe? Jenna reported them to the local police, but without a return address or any fingerprints, there was little they could do. They suggested she install a security system, and so she did, placing cameras at her front door and around the perimeter of her new home. One evening, as Jenna reviewed the footage from her cameras, she noticed a figure lingering just beyond the edge of the light. The figure was there every night at exactly 10:23 p.m., standing motionless, watching. The resolution was too low to make out a face, but Jenna's heart froze. She knew it was Alex. She contacted the police again, showing them the footage. Concerned, they agreed to patrol her street nightly, assuring her that they would catch the person loitering around her property. Jenna tried to convince herself she was safe, that the police presence would deter any further incidents. But the letters didn't stop. Neither did the figure disappear. Instead, things escalated. It began one stormy night when Jenna was jolted awake by the sound of her front doorbell. Fumbling in the dark, she checked her phone, 3:17 a.m. Heart pounding, she grabbed her tablet to view the live camera feed. There, at her front door, stood Alex, drenched from the rain, his eyes hollow, his skin paler than she remembered. But it was his smile that sent a chill down her spine, a twisted, knowing smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. Jenna didn't go to the door. Instead, she called the police, keeping her eyes on Alex through the digital screen. By the time the police arrived, Alex had disappeared. The officers searched the area but found no sign of him. They warned him through official channels to stay away from Jenna and advised her to seek a restraining order first thing in the morning. The next day, shaken but determined, Jenna went to the courthouse to file the necessary papers. When she returned home, there was a break in the pattern, no letter in her mailbox, which should have relieved her, yet somehow it only heightened her anxiety. That night, the sound of tapping at her window woke her. It was gentle at first, like the tentative picking of a bird, then grew more insistent, more desperate. Clutching her phone, Jenna tiptoed to the window, the curtains drawn tight. She hesitated, her hand trembling as it hovered over the fabric. Taking a deep breath, she pulled the curtain back. Alex's face met hers, separated only by the thin glass of the window pane, his fingertips tapping against the glass. His expression was one of sorrow mixed with an intense, unsettling longing. "Let me in, Jenna," he whispered, the sound muffled but clear enough to freeze her blood. "I just want to talk." The story pauses here, with Jenna facing her nightmare head-on, trapped between her desire for safety and the haunting presence of her past, leaving her next actions hanging in suspense. Jenna recoiled from the window, her heart racing as Alex's eyes bore into hers, full of a desperate hunger that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. She stumbled backwards, her phone slipping from her trembling hands and crashing onto the floor. In the brief seconds it took her to retrieve it, Alex began pounding on the glass, his voice rising from a whisper to a frantic plea. "Jenna, please, I need to see you," to explain. Ignoring the churning fear in her gut, Jenna dialed the police with shaky fingers. As she waited for them to answer, she dared another glance at the window. Alex had stopped pounding. He now stood silently, his forehead pressed against the glass, his breath fogging up the surface. His presence was a shadow that loomed larger with each passing second. The dispatcher's voice, calm and clear, cut through the thickening dread. "Police are on their way. Can you stay on the line with me until they arrive?" "Yes," Jenna whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please hurry." She retreated to the furthest corner of the room, keeping her eyes fixed on Alex. There was something profoundly wrong in his gaze, a deep-seated torment that twisted his features into something barely recognizable. Jenna felt a pang of fear-laced pity, quickly suppressed by the survival instinct that screamed at her to protect herself. Minutes ticked by like hours until the flashing lights of the police car illuminated her front yard. Only then did Alex step away from the window, retreating into the shadows just as the officers approached the house. The police searched the property but found no sign of Alex. "He's gone for now," one of the officers, Officer Harland, assured her, his voice grim. "But we'll keep a unit nearby. Call this number immediately if he shows up again." Jenna nodded, her entire body shaking. She thanked the officers as they left, then locked all her doors and windows, the weight of exhaustion settling over her. But sleep was elusive. Every sound sent a jolt of adrenaline through her weary body, every shadow seemed to move. Dawn broke with no further incidents, but the relief Jenna felt was tinged with the unease of knowing it was a temporary respite. She spent the day fortifying her home with additional locks and a new security system. The hardware store clerk recommended a contractor who specialized in home security, and by afternoon, Jenna's house was as secure as a fortress. But physical barriers did little to soothe the psychological torment. Jenna jumped at every call, every notification on her phone. When the sun set, her anxiety skyrocketed, the darkness outside mirroring the fear that gnawed at her insides. Her phone rang. Jenna hesitated before answering. The screen showed a number she didn't recognize. "Hello." Her voice was a strained echo of its usual tone. "Jenna, it's Alex." His voice was a cold whisper, sending a shiver down her spine. "You can't keep me out forever. How did you get this number?" Jenna's voice trembled despite her efforts to sound stern. "I have my ways. Jenna, please, I just want to talk. That's all I've ever wanted." Jenna's resolve hardened. "If you come near me again, the police will be here in minutes." There was a pause, a silence that throbbed with unspoken threats. Then Alex laughed, a sound devoid of any humor. "See you soon, Jenna." The line went dead, leaving Jenna staring at her phone in horror. She reported the call, but the police could only assure her that they were doing everything they could. As night enveloped her home once again, Jenna could not shake the feeling of being watched, of being hunted. That night, Jenna lay in her fortified home, the silence oppressive, the darkness a blanket that seemed to suffocate rather than comfort. It was then that the power cut out, plunging her into an abyss of blackness. Her heart pounded in the dark, her breaths quick and shallow. As her eyes adjusted to the lack of light, she noticed it, a faint glow from outside. It was coming from her backyard. Terrified but needing to know, Jenna cautiously approached the back window and peered out. There, illuminated by moonlight, was Alex. But he wasn't alone. Standing in a semicircle around him were figures, shadowy and indistinct, their features blurred but their intent horrifyingly clear. The story pauses here, with Jenna facing not only the immediate threat of Alex but also the mysterious, menacing figures that now joined him, casting an ominous shadow over her fate. As Jenna watched from behind the safety of her window, her mind raced with panic. The shadowy figures surrounding Alex were like nothing she had ever seen, their bodies slightly translucent and shimmering under the moonlight, moving with a fluid, unnatural grace. They seemed almost ghostly, their features blurring together in the darkness, making it impossible to discern any individual identities. Alex raised his hands, as if commanding the attention of these eerie figures, and began to speak in a low, haunting chant that Jenna couldn't understand. The words were foreign, melodic yet chilling, resonating with a sinister energy that seemed to ripple through the air. As he chanted, the figures began to sway gently, their movements synchronized and deliberate. Jenna's heart thudded painfully against her ribs. She fumbled for her phone to call the police again, her fingers trembling so violently that she almost dropped it. The dispatcher answered after the first ring, her voice a calm beacon in the terrifying storm engulfing Jenna. "Police are on their way. Stay on the line with me," the dispatcher instructed, her tone steady and reassuring. Jenna clutched the phone tightly, her eyes never leaving the scene unfolding in her backyard. They're doing some sort of ritual. I don't understand what's happening. Just stay where you are and keep the doors locked, the dispatcher responded. Help is coming. As Jenna waited, the chant intensified, and the figures began to circle Alex, their movements becoming faster, more frantic. The air seemed to thicken, the atmosphere charged with an electric tension that made Jenna's skin crawl. Suddenly, the ground beneath the figures shimmered, as if reflecting light from a source that wasn't there, and a low rumble shook the earth subtly beneath Jenna's feet. Her fear escalated as the figures stopped moving, standing perfectly still around Alex, who continued his chant with increasing fervor. Then, abruptly, he stopped and looked directly at Jenna's window, his eyes finding hers in the darkness. His gaze was piercing, triumphant, and terrifying. Jenna gasped and stepped back from the window, her heart racing. She was certain now that Alex knew she was watching. The powerlessness of the situation overwhelmed her. She was trapped in her own home, witnessing something she could not comprehend, something deeply unsettling and potentially dangerous. The figures turned to face the house, their bodies aligning so they all stared directly at Jenna, though their faces remained indistinct, shadows within shadows. Then, in unison, they took a step forward, crossing the boundary from her backyard onto her property. A sharp knock at her front door jolted Jenna out of her frozen state of fear. "Police? Open up," came a shout from outside. Relief flooded through Jenna as she sprinted to the door, flinging it open to find two officers standing on her porch, their expressions grave. "I saw him, the ex, and others, some sort of, I don't know, ritual." Jenna stammered, her words tumbling out in a rush. The officers nodded, one of them speaking into his radio while the other asked, "Where are they now?" Jenna led them to the back window, her hands still shaking. But when she pointed outside, her breath caught in her throat. The backyard was empty. No Alex, no figures, no signs of any disturbance. The grass lay undisturbed under the moonlight, as if nothing had ever happened. They were just here. Jenna's voice was a mix of confusion and fear. "I swear. We believe you," the officer who had stayed silent until now spoke up. "We're going to take a look around. It's possible they are still nearby. Stay inside and lock the door behind us." As the officers ventured into the night, Jenna locked the door, her mind racing with questions. Who were those figures? What had Alex been trying to do? And most importantly, where had they vanished to so suddenly? The story pauses here, leaving Jenna grappling with the terrifying mystery of the night's events, her safety hanging in the balance as unseen forces lurk just beyond the shadows. Jenna paced the length of her living room, each step echoing against the silence that had once again settled over the house. The night outside remained eerily quiet, the occasional rustle of wind through the trees sounding almost like whispered secrets. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and confusion, grappling with the reality of what she had witnessed and the utter disappearance of any evidence. Every few minutes, she glanced out the window, half expecting to see the figures reappear from the shadows. But the yard remained empty, bathed in the pale glow of the moonlight, undisturbed and peaceful as if the night's earlier events were just a figment of her imagination. After what felt like hours but were only minutes, the officers returned, their faces somber and puzzled. "We found no one," the first officer reported, his voice tinged with frustration. "No tracks or signs of anyone being out there, either. It's like they vanished into thin air." Jenna's stomach twisted with anxiety. "But I saw them, right there." She pointed out the window, her hand shaking. "And Alex, he was here." "We're not saying you didn't see what you saw," the second officer reassured her, a gentle firmness in his tone. "These situations can be complicated. We'll keep a patrol car in the area tonight, just in case. And we're going to look into this Alex further." Grateful for their belief and assistance yet still terrified, Jenna nodded her thanks as they left. The loneliness of the house enveloped her once they were gone, each creak and groan of the structure sounding louder in the aftermath of the police's departure. Unable to sleep and unwilling to turn her back on the window, Jenna moved a chair to face the yard, sitting down with a blanket wrapped tightly around her. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but fear spiked adrenaline through her veins with every shadow that danced in the corner of her vision. As dawn approached, the darkness began to retreat, chased away by the first timid rays of sunlight. Jenna felt her eyelids droop, the terror of the night battling with her body's desperate need for rest. Just as she was about to give in to sleep, a slight movement outside snapped her back to alertness. A figure was standing at the edge of the woods, a different figure, tall and slender, distinct from the shadows she had seen with Alex. This one was clearly female, dressed in a long, flowing garment that fluttered softly in the morning breeze. She stood perfectly still, her face obscured by the distance, but her posture emanating a sense of profound sadness and longing. Jenna's breath caught in her throat as she stared, unsure whether to feel scared or intrigued. The woman lifted a hand, gesturing for Jenna to come outside. Against her better judgment, Jenna felt a pull, a compulsion to step closer, to understand who this was and what connection, if any, she had to the night's disturbing events. Opening the door, Jenna stepped out into the cool morning air, her eyes never leaving the mysterious woman. As she drew closer, the woman's features became clearer, a gentle, sorrowful face with deep, piercing eyes that seemed to hold a millennia of grief. "You have seen the shadows, haven't you?" the woman asked, her voice melodious yet filled with a haunting sadness. Jenna nodded, unable to find her voice, her mind racing with questions. "They are lost, caught between worlds," the woman continued, her eyes reflecting a somber light. "And your ex, Alex, he has stirred them from their slumber, used them for his own purpose. But he does not fully understand the power he is meddling with." "But who are you?" Jenna finally managed to ask, her voice a mere whisper. The woman smiled sadly, stepping closer. "Someone who has fought the shadows for far longer than you can imagine. And I need your help to stop them, and Alex, before it is too late." The story pauses here, introducing a new, mysterious ally into Jenna's increasingly supernatural ordeal, deepening the intrigue and danger as they prepare to confront the unleashed forces and a misguided Alex. Jenna, both confused and intrigued, stared at the mysterious woman. Her presence exuded an otherworldly aura, calming yet profoundly sad. "How can I help?" Jenna asked, her curiosity piqued despite the obvious danger. "And how do we stop Alex?" The woman took a deep breath, her gaze drifting towards the horizon where the early morning sun was now casting long shadows through the trees. "Alex has found a way to manipulate the shadows, entities that are neither here nor in the beyond. They are remnants of unfulfilled destinies, emotions, and energies trapped in a liminal space," she explained, her voice low, carrying the weight of centuries of hidden knowledge. "To control them, he must have found the Arcanum, a relic capable of bending the will of these shadows." Jenna felt a chill run down her spine. She remembered Alex's obsession with occult books and artifacts, which he believed held secret powers. What does he want with them? She asked, her mind racing with the implications of his actions. He seeks to alter reality to his desires, perhaps to erase his past, or to manipulate the future, the woman replied, her eyes narrowing as she considered the possibilities. But tampering with such forces can have dire consequences, not just for him but for the fabric of this world. And the Arcanum, this relic, how do we find it? Jenna inquired, a sense of urgency building within her. The woman turned, her cloak swirling around her as she began to walk slowly back towards the woods. Follow me, she said simply. Jenna hesitated for a moment before following the enigmatic figure into the dense forest, where the light of day seemed unable to penetrate the thick canopy. As they walked, the woman began to speak of the history of the Arcanum. It was created in the 13th century, a tool of alchemists who believed it could help them control the natural elements. But they soon realized it could influence more ethereal forces. Fearing its power, they split it into 3 parts, scattering them across the globe. Jenna listened intently, her previous life as a librarian driving her passion for uncovering forgotten lore. And Alex has one of these parts. Yes, and he is likely searching for the others. We must find them first, the woman stated, her tone grave. The forest seemed to close in around them, the atmosphere thickening with a palpable tension as they ventured deeper. Suddenly, the woman stopped and pointed to a small clearing where the sun broke through the dense foliage, illuminating an ancient stone pedestal that looked out of place in the natural setting. Here lies a map, the woman said, motioning towards the pedestal, which was covered in moss and ancient runes. It will show us where the pieces of the Arcanum are hidden. Jenna stepped closer, examining the intricate carvings on the stone. As she traced her fingers over the cold surface, the runes began to glow faintly, responding to her touch. A map indeed began to form, lines of light connecting various points across the globe. We need to go to these places, Jenna said, her voice filled with determination but also fear, knowing the journey would be fraught with danger. Yes, and we must be swift. Alex is already ahead of us, the woman replied, her eyes reflecting the map's glow. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees, a sound that seemed neither animal nor human. Jenna's heart raced as shadowy figures began to emerge from the underbrush, their forms more solid than the ghostly entities she had seen with Alex, but just as terrifying. We're not alone, Jenna whispered, taking a step back towards the woman. No, we are not, the woman confirmed, her voice steady. The shadows are drawn to the Arcanum's power. They will try to stop us. As the figures closed in, their intentions unclear but undoubtedly hostile, Jenna prepared herself for a confrontation, her fate now inextricably linked with that of her mysterious new ally and the dangerous quest they were about to undertake. The story pauses here, with Jenna and the mysterious woman surrounded by ominous figures in the heart of an ancient forest, the quest for the Arcanum's pieces about to begin, their journey promising to be as perilous as it is imperative. As the shadows converged around Jenna and the mysterious woman, a palpable sense of doom filled the air. The forest seemed to close in, the light dimming as if night were falling prematurely. Jenna felt the grip of fear tighten around her heart, but she steeled herself, determined to face whatever came. The woman, sensing Jenna's resolve, nodded slightly and began to chant in a low, sonorous voice that seemed to resonate with the ancient trees themselves. Her words were in a language Jenna didn't understand, lyrical yet commanding. As she chanted, the air around them shimmered, and a barrier of light slowly formed a circle at their feet, spreading outward to encompass them both. The approaching shadows halted as if repelled by the barrier, their forms flickering like flames in a strong wind. They circled the barrier, searching for a way in, their growls low and menacing. Jenna watched, her breath caught in her throat, as the woman continued her incantations, her voice growing louder and more forceful. Suddenly, the central figure among the shadows stepped forward, its form stabilizing into the recognizable shape of Alex. His eyes, once kind and warm, now glowed with a malevolent light. "Jenner, you don't understand what you're doing," he called out, his voice cutting through the woman's chant. "Join me, and we can use the arcanum together. We can reshape the world." Jenner's heart ached with the pain of his betrayal, but she saw now the darkness that had consumed him. "Alex, this isn't the way. You're hurting innocent people, you're meddling with forces you don't understand." But Alex's face twisted with anger. "I understand more than you could ever know. If you won't join me, then you will be swept aside." With a furious gesture, he directed the shadows to attack. The woman's chanting crescendoed to a peak, her voice echoing powerfully through the forest. With a final, emphatic word, she thrust her hands forward, sending a wave of energy that blasted the shadows back. Alex staggered, momentarily surprised by the strength of her magic. Seizing the moment, Jenna ran forward, breaking through the barrier. She approached Alex, her heart heavy. "Alex, please, stop this. It doesn't have to end like this." Alex, his face a mask of conflict, hesitated. In that moment of hesitation, the shadows, no longer under his control, swirled around him, their forms becoming more aggressive, more chaotic. Alex looked at Jenner, a flicker of the man he once was parsing across his face. "Jenner, but before he could finish, the shadows enveloped him, pulling him into their dark embrace. Jenner cried out, rushing towards him, but the woman caught her arm, pulling her back. "It's too late for him," she said softly, the sorrow in her voice mirroring Jenner's own grief. As they watched, the shadows and Alex disappeared into the forest, leaving no trace behind. The woman turned to Jenner, her expression solemn. "This is the burden of the arcanum. It can bring great power, but at a great cost. We must ensure it never falls into the wrong hands again." Jenna nodded, wiping away her tears. She looked back at the spot where Alex had vanished, her resolve hardening. "Then let's finish this. For Alex and for everyone else he endangered." Together, Jenner and the woman set out to retrieve the remaining pieces of the arcanum, their journey fraught with challenges and shadowed by the loss of what Jenner had once held dear. But in her heart, a fire was kindled, a fire to protect, to rectify, and to prevent such darkness from ever rising again. The story ends here, with Jenna transformed from a victim to a guardian, her path forever altered by the events that unfolded in the quiet town of Redwood and the mysterious depths of its surrounding forest.